Hey guys, Nick here. Aleah's here too. Showcases with Nick and Aleah. We're trying something new out this time, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have it with someone so prominent in the barbecue community. Jared from How Low Can You Slow? Um, we're glad to have you today. Thank you for opening up your schedule and all of that. We're so pleased to have you.
Happy to do it.
Cool, cool. Yeah, so if you have that's Aleah. She does all the stuff behind the scenes, content creation and runs the TikTok and does all the other stuff that I don't know how to do. And luckily to have all our skills, the whole Adobe thing and it's out of my repertoire. So glad
Yeah,
to
cool.
have her on as well. So to get started, if you want, to talk about your story, where you started. I know you grew up in New Zealand and stuff and all that. So if you want to give us a little bit more background about you and let everyone listening know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in New Zealand. I lived in New Zealand till I was, I don't know, 22 or whatever. And then I moved to Australia, which is not too far away. But that's why my accent is all jacked up. It's all over the place. It's hard to sort of pin down exactly where I sound like I'm from. But when I was in Australia, that's kind of where I entered the barbecue scene. It's a really sort of emerging kind of a community there. And so I did that for about 10 years. I was involved in it since about 2016. And then I moved to Idaho in the US. So I don't know how I picked like the least barbecue place in America, but I did. I managed to do that.
You also went from probably one of the more interesting places in the world to probably one of the most boring places in the United States. So how would you say, sorry, Nick?
No, you're good. No, you're all
okay.
good.
So I saw that you had a whole lot of different ideas and different flavors going on your page. How do you come up with these cool ideas and how did you sort of learn all these cool flavors?
Yeah, fair question. Sorry, let me just plug in my headphones so I can make sure that the sound isn't being annoying. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so like as far as like when I create recipes or when I come up with new ideas, it kind of comes from all sorts of places. I mean, some of the time I will see something that someone's making, so someone else that I follow that I think is really, really good. And so I will kind of get inspired by that, or sometimes that will kind of be like the kernel of an idea that turns into something else. Sometimes I will just think of something crazy, or I'm sort of really trying hard to kind of make something that would be interesting or seasonal or specific for something like that. One of the best places, and this is crazy, but one of the best places I get ideas is like diners, drive-ins, and dives. Because in that show, like those people create some insane food ideas.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of just like take that and make like a barbecue spin on it. I really love that show. It's such a good show.
That show is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you, with all of, you mentioned, you get like intrigued and stuff by a wide variety of shows and all that kind of stuff. We talked a little bit earlier and you're making a book. Are you going to be drawing from all those, different areas of, is it going to be like New Zealand and America mixed, a little bit of Australia in there, or, tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah, man. So it's published, available on May 24th this year, just in time for Father's Day. So the book itself is based primarily around like rotisserie style smoking. But yeah, one of the cool things that I was able to do with the book when I was writing it is sort of include recipes from all different styles of barbecue across the world. So there's sort of some like South African style like barbecue techniques in there and recipes. There's South American styles. There's sort of some Korean style stuff in there from Korean barbecue. And of course, like there's the Australian American style barbecues included in there as well. So I really focused on trying to get sort of recipes and ideas and sort of ingredients that were available, but very much sort of reminiscent of those cultural barbecue recipes included throughout the book. So I think it's a pretty good sort of mix of international kind of barbecue ideas and recipes.
Awesome.
Did you take sort of inspiration from those recipes and different things that you're talking about when you started to develop those rubs that you mentioned to us before when we were talking to you?
Yeah, for sure. So the rubs are something that I kind of it's a funny thing. I'm getting ready to launch those in the next couple of weeks, but it kind of happened in a really organically kind of weird way. I cook barbecue all the time. I'm cooking at least once or twice a week at minimum. And so I found that I was sort of using a lot of obviously spice ingredients. So I started kind of ordering it more in bulk. And when you start getting like, 6 or 7 bags of 25 pounds of salt and sugar arriving to your house, you kind of start thinking like, this is kind of crazy. And then I was making a lot of the same rubs because I knew that I liked them and I knew that they were for good stuff. And so I'm buying these bulk spices. I have these same rubs that I'm setting aside all the time. It kind of made sense to then just sort of slap a label on the front and get that sent out to people. So absolutely, like the rubs that are releasing, some of them are sort of, the traditional American barbecue style. There are some other flavors involved there. One of the rubs, it's sort of very like Latin American, South American adobo style. So there's some really cool introductions of flavors and things in there in those rubs as well. So absolutely can pair well with the recipes in the book or the other recipes that I share on my Instagram and on my website.
Cool.
That's very interesting. I'd be very willing to try and sort of compare. If you haven't seen so far, we've been trying different rubs that people have showed us, and it's been very interesting to see the different flavors and everything that
I'm sure we can make that work.
Yeah. Whether it's on, we put it on tortilla chips, we've kind of done whatever we can get our hands on, those little pretzel crisps, we put some rubs on and different spices and seasonings. So we're all cool for trying new things for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you kind of like to teach people how to make better barbecue and sort of become more educated. Is this more of a beginner how to, or do you educate all levels or?
Yeah. So on Instagram, a lot of what I do is kind of like recipes and sort of inspirations. I do teach techniques on there as well. Some of them are basic, some of them are a little bit more advanced, but I'm not a butcher. I'm not like a professional chef or anything like that, not even close. So it's all sort of things that I've learned or taught myself. But I guess I kind of just really find it inspirational and really fulfilling to kind of help people to learn how to do things better. And barbecue is something that I'm really passionate about. And so I really wanted to make sure that I could find a way to help people to learn how to do that for themselves. So I definitely focus on like the backyard barbecuer. I don't sort of do like competition style. I don't teach people how to cater barbecue or anything like that. My person is the guy in his backyard who's just is sick of burning his briskets or undercooking his pulled pork and just wants to do a better job at that. So I have a Facebook page, Barbecue for Beginners on Facebook, and in that group is sort of a place where people can ask questions or they can share ideas or whatever it is that's going on. But in advance to that, I actually have some courses that people can sort of get a real in-depth look at how to understand and make better barbecue themselves. So I would say that I sort of try to help people from all different angles. But certainly the backyard barbecuer is the person that I look to kind of try to help.
So what would you say is your number one tip for the backyard barbecuer on getting started?
If you're new to barbecue, the biggest tip I can say is that it's all about internal temperature. Traditional cooking recipes will give you like a time as to how long something should take to cook, but in barbecue, that's just not how it's done. Internal temperature is where it's at. The difference between 193 degrees Fahrenheit and 203 degrees Fahrenheit is massive. And so if you're going by time rather than temperature, you're not going to get ideal results. So everyone should invest in a good thermometer, and you can pick one up for like $30, an internal temperature thermometer.
Awesome. One thing that like I find very intriguing about you is we talked about earlier is moving from, Aleah said one of the most interesting places in the world to Idaho. What are, you talk about the backyard barbecue, or, what is the main difference or a couple differences between the backyard barbecue or here in the States versus back in New Zealand, Australia?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting. Where I'm from, like when you say barbecue, people think that you mean like, like sausages, burnt steaks on like a propane grill. That's what barbecue is where I'm from, but kind of this emerging community, and it is getting much larger, is like American style barbecue. So
Gotcha.
I would absolutely say that Australian barbecue is very much modeled after American barbecue. But probably the biggest difference I would say is that because it's so new and there isn't like a deep history to it like there is in America, is that barbecue in Australia or New Zealand is very like non-regional. So in the US, if you're from North Carolina and you're from South Carolina, you have real particular ways about how you think barbecue should be cooked. If you're from Kentucky, if you're from Tennessee, there are different things that you will use. There are different ingredients.
Mhm.
There are different meats that you will use. Texas barbecue is so different from other places. So that's probably the biggest difference, is that non-regional aspect. So, where I'm from, you can put that Texas style brisket next to that Carolina style pork and no one cares. No one has a problem if you're adding ketchup to your barbecue sauce, if you're adding something else. It's very non-regional. And because of that, I think it kind of creates this opportunity for experimentation and introduction of things that you wouldn't necessarily have if you were really committed to that regional kind of recipe or style. And I think that that's a really interesting kind of component to it. There's some other things that we do a little bit differently, like lamb is a huge category in Australian barbecue. It's actually something that, like, at competitive barbecues, lamb is included as a category because it's such a prominent protein.
Mhm.
Whereas in the US, it's a much less common ingredient. If you're from somewhere that lamb is common, then absolutely that's something that you have a lot. But for most people, that's very unusual. So it's just kind of got some subtle differences, but the non-regional aspect, I'd say, is probably the biggest one.
You're saying you've tried all these different cooks and everything. What would you say is the one thing that you haven't tried yet, or that you've seen other people doing that you're really interested in trying?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of sort of, one of the things that I really like about barbecue is that it sort of crosses over into other sort of cuisines quite easily. And probably one of the most easily transferable is like Mexican style food.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of Mexican style food that I would say I would love to kind of put a smoked twist on. Tamales is absolutely one. Carnitas is something that I have tried and not nailed. But I'd say that's probably a big one. Other than that, probably getting more into the side of like pastrami and pickling and things like that with meat. Aging even is something that I haven't done enough of, but I really do want to sort of get more into.
I'm very interested in the aging process because I've seen a lot of the butchers that we follow on our TikTok page, and they'll use different liquors and whiskeys and bourbons. And I'm just very interested. I've never had meat that was aged like that. And I'm very interested to see the different flavor that brings.
Yeah, I've never really tried some of those sort of like added ingredient ones where they will wrap it in cheesecloth and then sort of like soak it in like wine or alcohol like that.
Mhm.
I've never tried that, but like aged meat, depending on how long it's been aged for, can be a bit of an acquired taste. It gets a bit of kind of like a funkiness to it, depending on how long it's been aged for. So if you're a cheese person, you might be into sort of some of those more aged meats, but it's definitely a scale. I would say that I'm still developing my palate in that world.
Yeah, because I've seen some of those, like the dry aged steaks, and they look dry, of course, but there's like different coloring on it and like all that stuff. And I'm usually down to try everything, but when stuff starts growing on meat, I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm for that, but
Yeah,
gotta
my
try
sweet
everything
spot.
once.
Yeah, my sweet spot is about like 50 days. I'd say that that's like a good amount. When you start sort of like pushing over that 100 days, things start getting a little bit too funky for me.
So as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else you want to tell people about barbecue or or social media or getting started? Anyone you'd like to shout out maybe?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing for me is just like, if you have an interest in barbecue, absolutely get into it. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to invest a lot in equipment. A lot of people will think that in order for them to start, they have to buy like a $2,000 Traeger or spend $1,500 worth of equipment. And you really don't. I started off in barbecue with like a $65 smoker that I got from the hardware store. It was super podunk, hard to use, but it was kind of an introduction. So I wouldn't say that it has to be expensive. Barbecue can be really simple. It just has to be sort of something that, you need to learn a little bit about so that you sort of get some results that you're happy with, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive.
Well said. We definitely started to learn about the whole equipment thing because we are currently borrowing knives from one of our coworkers because we had a Dollar Tree dollar store knife, and we learned very quickly that doesn't really cut through a chicken very well.
For sure. Yeah, you can spend more money and make life easier for yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
Usually I'd say it's more just about like where you choose to spend your money. If you want to drop $40 on a knife that's reasonably good, you drop $25-$30 on a thermometer and maybe $100 on a real cheap smoker, like you have got it made. That's a real good start for something that other people spend 20 grand on.
For real.
Yeah.
Awesome. One little thing that I have is, you're from Idaho, so you kind of, understand the cold just as much as we do up here in Ohio. And like the one challenge, that me, Aleah, and our boss Chuck have faced is, grilling out in the cold and trying to smoke things out in the cold can be, challenging sometimes when, you open up the top to see how everything's going, and then you close the top and it's back down to 20 degrees internal temp. So what are, do you have any tips or tricks on how to combat that? Or, what's your kind of method for, when you grill or smoke things outside in the cold?
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it's definitely something we deal with here in Idaho. It wasn't something I had a problem with in Australia. But yeah, so it is a real thing. For starters, even just maintaining temperature in the cold is going to use way more fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So probably the biggest thing I would say is use something that has a decent amount of insulation. So depending on the thickness of the metal that your smoker is made from can make a big difference as to how much heat it will retain.
Gotcha.
So that can be part of it. Cheaper smokers traditionally will have less insulation, so that can be more of a problem. Obviously not checking it as frequently is a big part of that. The more you open that lid, the more heat you're going to lose and the more time and fuel it's going to take to build back up. But something I've had a lot of success with over this winter period is I've been using something called the Nomad Grill. It's something that I use a lot. Those guys are awesome. I definitely have to give those guys a shout out. They do some amazing equipment. But this Nomad Grill, I use it as a smoker almost exclusively. And the cool thing about it is that the unit itself is fairly small. So I use some of their charcoal. It's kind of like a compressed charcoal log.
Oh, cool.
I use probably about 6 of them in it. And because the unit is fairly small, after I've opened it up and I've spritzed or I've checked the temperature or I've done whatever I'm doing, when I close it back down, it will actually come back to temperature very, very quickly.
Oh, sweet.
Because of the size of the unit. So that's something that I've had a lot of success with.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to do like a whole brisket or a couple of like pork butts at once, I probably wouldn't have the same amount of luck with a unit that's sort of, it's fairly small. It's a very, very portable unit. But for most of what I cook, it's a fantastic option in the cold.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Keep that in mind next time.
Exactly. Because we still have about 2 months of cold, I would say. So
yeah, okay. Yeah. I wouldn't let it hold you back from doing some stuff. It's a little bit more annoying to cook in the cold for sure, but
Yeah.
wouldn't let it hold you back.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we are going to send you a little certificate for hanging out with us today and a couple other goodies. So keep an eye
cool.
out for that.
Awesome.
We're very thankful for having you today. You've been awesome to talk to and catch up with.
Yeah.
And Nick, you got anything else to say or add?
No, just thank you. One little thing we try to do is if you could sit down with someone, you know, past, present, sit down and have a drink with, who would it be and why?
Like in the barbecue community or just in general?
Anyone. Yeah, anyone through
Cool.
history.
This was a little bit of a weird one. It's someone who's not super popular or well known here in the US, but Richard Branson. Actually, I think he's Sir Richard Branson. He's sort of like an entrepreneur out of the UK.
Yeah.
I really like him. One of the things that I'm really inspired by from him is that like his parents didn't have money. He sort of is very, very self-made, and that's something that I really respect. He just decided he wanted to do something cool and then just learned how to do it. And I really like to sort of take that kind of notion on board because there's lots of things that I don't know how to do, but I try to just sort of like get stuck into it when I want to. So I find him really inspiring.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So we can go ahead and do our little outro here.
All right.
So thank you everybody so much for watching. Thank you again to How Low Can You Slow for joining us today. And if you have anyone who would like to be a part of our showcases, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, TikTok, or email us at info@goldenprotective.com. Thank you guys for being on the showcase today. As always, Nick is always here, but thank you, How Low Can You Slow, for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.